action.
Okay, so I'm starting with a partially assembled battery module. The extruded aluminum battery case has had the end cap assembled on it. It's had some silicone applied to the bottom of it and the battery pack inserted. The wires on the battery pack have been cut and one end exposed. Normally the wires are a lot longer and that's a little bit unmanageable as we begin trying to solder things. So trim the wires down. First step here is to take a spacer to fill in this area that the heat shrink tubing tends to fall into. That area is later plugged with silicone, but for now I need to just make sure that I don't lose those heat shrink tubes down there because they are very difficult to get out. Okay, so once the heat shrink tubes are available, I take a pre-wired connector. I did this the other day. I crimped and soldered each of the pins that goes in and assembled this. I then put some glue in there and then put some heat shrink tubing on to make this a waterproof connection. Inserted that wire through the end cap that I've drilled a hole in and inserted the rubber grommet to protect the wire. That will also help make it a waterproof connection. And then I've trimmed and cut the ends here. First step is matching the black wire, which I've pre-cut here, to the blue wire. First thing I do is I bend that in half so that I can begin the twisting operation. The goal here is to make these two wires twisted together as tightly as possible for both the battery wire connected onto the connector wire and the connector onto the battery wire. I want them twisted snugly together, and I want that twist to be fairly low profile and flush. And the next thing I do is I wrap the heat shrink with just a moistened paper towel to prevent that heat shrink from shrinking during the soldering process. Now that that's wrapped, I take the soldering iron, I heat the wire so that it absorbs the solder, and begin making this this twisted junction a soldered tight connection that's not going to have any long-term issues. So it's going to be just a very well bonded connection. Heating the wire so that the solder absorbs into it, making sure that there is solder on all of the various locations of this twisted junction. And once I'm pretty confident that the solder is absorbed and pulled into the wire, and therefore that twist junction is going to be very robust, I'm then able to set that down, cool the solder connection, and slide the heat shrink tube over that connection. Now that that heat shrink tube is protecting the black wire, I can strip the end of the red wire here, twist that wire so it's easier to manage. Now do the same exact process with the brown and the red. So crimp that brown one, twist it onto the red one, twist the red one onto the brown one. Make sure that that's a very flat junction so that the heat shrink slides over it. Then protect the heat shrink with my connection, or with my moistened towel here. And I don't care at this point about the other heat shrink tubing because I'm going to be heat shrinking that in just a moment. I'll show you that in a minute. So if it shrinks early because of the heat of being near the soldering iron, that's okay. I haven't had that happen, so I'm not too concerned about it. But it will be shrunk anyway later. So again, I'm heating the wire so that solder is absorbed well into the wire. Cool it off with the paper towel. And then I can slide the heat shrink back up over that wire. That's good. I can remove my spacer now, and I can test it on this light, and therefore it works. So we're good there. So I'll show you the heat shrink process next.